Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. I'm funny. Hey guys, original link to the video, top of the description. This was only 5 days ago, so make sure, if you haven't seen it, go check it out from Girl Gone London. Do a preemptive sub, like. Uh, let's go. We'd love for you guys to hit all the same buttons, not the bad button. Okay, let's go. Americans don't get British humor. Here's why. I've seen a few videos on American versus British humor. The main difference, I have to go back to the, I think it was Jeremy Clarkson. No, it was Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry, who said, there's this movie called The Animal House. And in a scene, there's this kind of more kind of dorky person, like with the ukulele or guitar. And then they're both American in the movie, but then like the classic frat guy, like walking down the stairs and taking the ukulele and just smashing it, right? And he said, if I remember correctly, I could be paraphrasing a bit, that Americans see themselves as the funny thing of like the guy just like smashing the other thing, whereas the British person wants to be the guy playing the ukulele. And I think what he means by that, or meant by that, is that British people find more comedy in like the worst of situations, whereas Americans want to be the, Seinfeld type guy, like quick responses, kind of cool guy, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that's a universal thing, and there aren't going to be American comedies that have that aspect, but I thought that was an interesting comparison, so I hope that made sense. My name's Connor, if you're new. I said all this stuff, right? Girl Gone London. Americans don't get British humor. I love the parentheses U for the British spelling. Incorrect spelling. JK, joking. Here's why. Let's go. Enough of the intro. Enough talking.
Americans feel they can relax and laugh at something when it's not too mean or too dark. Brits don't feel like they can relax and laugh at something unless they're assured it's not too positive. Why did the American version of the British show The Office have to stop following the British format after the very first episode?
I could do a whole video just after hearing that comment. I haven't actually finished the British version of The Office over on Patreon. I still have like 4 episodes to go or 6 episodes to go, which I gotta finish. I keep swapping between series. Like I have a bunch going. But the American Office first season is gold. The second season, gold. The third season, gold. After the third season, it starts, especially after the third season, it starts to turn into a sitcom like Friends or something like that, where the charm of the adaptation of the American Office from the British Office in the first 2 seasons is that it feels like an office. Like it does not feel like a Hollywood set. It just seems like, wow, I feel like I could apply somewhere and work in an office and this wouldn't be too far from it. And they add the funnies into that, right? As soon as the American Office gets to season 5, it's all over. Especially after Michael Scott left, because it turns into like, this isn't an office anymore. This is just another sitcom of just like funny things that would never happen in a real office, but are funny, right? So I'm going to stop there. I could talk too long, but I prefer the first 2 seasons of the American Office to the British Office, but the rest of the American Office sucks. Let me just say that.
And why do so many Americans not understand Blackadder? Why does
I
this
love
article
Blackadder.
from 1999 ask fellow Brits the following question? Why don't we love Seinfeld? Seinfeld was a top-rated show in America, it reads. Its final episode attracted American TV's highest ever audience, yet its audience in Britain has been in the range of the more austere art shows. If you guessed that the answer to all of these why questions was humor, then I'm not that impressed because it was in the title of the video. Aside from the general communication differences, humor is one of those areas where the UK and the USA are about as different as you could be, and the ways in which we express humor and the things we find funny are the topics of today's video. Now, this isn't to say that no British person has ever enjoyed an American comedy. Friends, after all, is one of the top-rated American shows here in the UK. And it's not to say that no Americans have ever enjoyed a British comedy.
I'm surprised by that. I thought that Brits would have disliked Friends for the same exact reason they dislike Seinfeld. So I wonder what makes this different, you know?
Shows here in the UK. And it's not to say that no Americans have ever enjoyed a British comedy. Monty Python, for example, is known by a lot of Americans.
Brilliant.
But if we zoom out and generalize, as we often do on this channel, the differences become obvious.
Peep Show as well.
One of the most popular ways in day-to-day life that
Inbetweeners.
Brits will show affection and make jokes is doing something called taking the mick. There are a few different meanings to this
piss?
phrase, but the more positive one that we're going with today is the idea that someone is making fun of you from a place of humor and because they actually like you. Used in this context, it's not like bullying or making fun of someone that you don't like. Instead,
Banter?
it's joking around with a friend, making jokes at their expense, but in a jesting way. Culturally, this does not translate in the US. Now, after more than 10 years here, my humor is different and my personal brand of humor has always been a bit sarcastic, so I have adapted to and understand and use this type of humor myself, but if you just roll up into some random town in North Carolina and try doing this to someone, you are going to get some strange looks or possibly shot, depending on the town you walk into. This is also a part of what's known as banter. By definition, banter is the playful and friendly exchanging of teasing remarks. It's good-natured. Americans don't really banter, not like Brits do. Banter is typically quick, and it's all about social bonding. In the US, you would typically say compliments to generate goodwill. In the UK, you use jest to do the same thing. It is an adjustment when you first move here to understand that everyone doesn't actually hate you, and they're only willing to banter with you or to take the mick.
I think American. Let me.
When they like you or trust you.
I think Americans probably more do this with close friends, and so they're probably going to assume that you're just like insulting them, and they won't have a comeback, and then it'll just be an awkward interaction.
They didn't, they just ignore you. Because they're not actually making fun of you to destroy your feelings, but to show you that they accept you and have positive feelings towards you, which is, of course, far too vulnerable a thing in the UK to say out loud. I kid, but only slightly. The next difference on my list is that British humor is just overall darker than American humor. Which brings us to the show, The Office. Before we get into what Ricky Gervais has to say about the darkness of the British version of The Office, let's talk about how you can watch both the US and UK version of The Office without needing to be in its country of origin. And that's Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video and the best way to
I do this for every video I watch, guys. I react to videos. I don't create videos. Least I can do. You can fast forward if you want. I'm not making you stay here. I'm going to watch through the ads. I'm going to recommend the promo codes and links. It gives them more money from their content.
Block and access websites and streaming services that aren't typically available in your country. Surfshark is a VPN, which stands for Virtual Private Network, which is a fancy way of saying it encrypts your internet traffic and hides your IP address, which is location-based, meaning that you can access over 3,000 of their servers in countries across the globe. Suddenly, you aren't restricted to just watching shows that are available on services in your own country. For example, the British Office Office is available on BBC iPlayer, which can be restricted access if you're not connecting to the website within the UK. But with Surfshark, no matter where you are, it works seamlessly. And if you're in the UK and want to check out the US version of The Office, there are 7 countries that currently have it as part of their Netflix streaming catalog. Just use Surfshark to connect to one of those servers and there you go. In fact, I used my personal Surfshark account to access a lot of the research for this video as I was watching American and British comedies and needed access to shows from around the world. If you want to try Surfshark for yourself, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee so you can experience what it has to offer with no risk. If you change your mind, you get your money back. Go to surfshark.com/GGL for an extra 4 months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price.
Use the /GGL.
Now, Ricky Gervais, who is a British icon and you'll find in the British version of The Office, had an interesting insight into the differences between the British and American version.
I think a lot of Americans know him from the Golden Globe speech of like 2020, 2019. Hilarious. Please look it up.
Of the show of The Office had an interesting insight into the differences between the British and American version of the show. He says, "We had to make Michael Scott a slightly nicer guy with a rosier outlook to life. He could still be childish and insecure and even a bore, but he couldn't be too mean. The irony is, of course, that I think David Brent's dark dissension and eventual redemption made him all the more compelling, but I think that's a lot more palatable in Britain for the reasons already stated."
I disagree with that. I think Michael Scott does give the same awkward, mean comments like David Brent does, but Michael Scott has like, he's given slightly more of an excuse because he's just like, he's clearly like, he's not thinking. He's just like, thinks it's right. And David Brent might be like more direct and it's like less obviously a joke. But I think Michael Scott, I'm thinking of many times where he just does, especially the first episode, like cookie, or it's like, uh-oh, Holocaust versus slavery. Championships.
Brits almost expect doom and gloom, so to start off that way but then have a happy ending is an unexpected joy. Network America has to give people a reason to like you, not just a reason to watch you. In Britain, we stop watching things like Big Brother when the villain is evicted. We don't want to watch a bunch of idiots having a good time. We want them to be as miserable as us. America rewards upfront, on-your-sleeve niceness. A perceived wicked streak is somewhat frowned upon. Now, I included the whole quote here because he is so spot on for how I perceive American versus British comedy and why I personally didn't like the British version of The Office when I first watched it. That doom and gloom kind of comedy that he talks about doesn't sell as well in the US.
It just kind of gets to me eventually. Like, especially longer it goes, it's just like, oh my God. And
you can actually see this in all types of television.
Not like I'm offended, but I'm just like, oh God, this is so depressing.
Including
and sorry, interrupting here. It's the finale. I think I haven't seen the end episodes of The Office. Okay. But the what annoys me so much about American comedy in The Office is that at the end of The Office, I think season 9 is the last one, everyone lives happily ever after. And that's not the point of the show. It's to show a funny scene in a believable office, and in the end, you know, Michael is always a hopeless romantic, and everything always goes wrong. But in the end, Michael finds the perfect one. He ends up marrying Holly. They end up having a great life and having kids. Pam marries Jim. Angela and Dwight get together. Ryan and Kelly, like, it's like everyone lives happily ever after, and I don't want that. Like, that removes the whole point of the show.
of The Office when I first watched it. That doom and gloom kind of comedy that he talks about doesn't sell as well in the US. And you can actually see this in all types of television, including the differences between UK and USA soap operas, but that's for another video. British humor is slightly dark. Just the other day, I made a video while I was ill and I showed my inspirational blanket with an inspirational quote on it about going after your dreams. One of the comments made a funny but astute observation, saying something along the lines of the British version of that blanket says, "Don't worry, it all ends soon." Dark humor is much more appreciated in the UK than in the USA, and their comedies show this. Another example would be Fleabag, a UK show that relies on some pretty dark humor. Compare this to American shows like Friends, there's nothing dark about it. It's practically uplifting, and even when things are going wrong, there's that rosy outlook to life that Ricky Gervais is talking about.
I think the American dream is over exaggerated. Not everything is great in America, but I think there is an attitude of, maybe because of the historical classism in the UK, where it's like where you can go is less dependent on what you can do with your life and more on where you were born, what you were born into. And that there's a sort of acceptance in that, and that can transfer towards comedy and just laughing it off,
And Americans like and react to this type of comedy. Americans feel they can relax and laugh at something when it's not too mean or too dark. Brits don't feel like they can relax and laugh at something unless they're assured it's not too positive. And this is why the US version of The Office had to adapt and create its own twist on the show after the first episode.
After the first season, it may be second season, okay? And the first season, especially the first episodes, were like 1-for-1 copies of the original Office episodes. So
the British version just wouldn't land for an American audience. Another big difference in humor across the pond is what we find funny. British humor often involves cringy or awkward moments as the star of the show.
Don't tell me The Office is absent of cringy moments. It definitely is.
Who was watching the Inbetweeners posted on Reddit saying, "How do you Brits watch cringe comedy?"
Inbetweeners is awesome. I watched every episode.
Watching the Inbetweeners, and every episode made me want to shrivel up into a ball and die.
Really? This is an example of a British show that I didn't. It was just funny. Like, there was nothing American or British about it. It was just funny. So I disagree here.
Is this just normal for you? And the commenters responded that yes, this is part of it. It's art imitating life. It's funny to see awkward moments happen to someone else, and misfortune can be funny. American comedy, on the other hand, is typically about escapism. The situations that happens to characters usually ends up being more over the top rather than the cringy, true to life situations in a British comedy. When an American watches a British comedy, many times they're left wondering, where's the humor? I just feel awkward because they're not understanding that that is the humor. Difference 4 on my list has to do with slapstick or physical humor. From as far back as the Three Stooges, Americans love watching someone fall down, get hit by a plank of wood, or engage in some other physical comedy that probably wouldn't happen in real life. Slapstick is one of the types of humor that is the most open and easily understood. It doesn't require nuance. Hence why there's a lot of slapstick comedy in kids' movies, because they can easily understand the joke before they can understand the verbal nuances of verbal jokes. British humor relies much less on slapstick comedy, though of course you can still find it, but it's typically a bit more understated rather than something like Will Ferrell driving a motorcycle through a house and getting stuck in a wall, which was a scene from an American comedy I just watched the other day. Another difference is what constitutes a joke. When you think of an American comedy, you're often going to think of a sitcom like Friends or Seinfeld. The jokes are based around the one-liners and the punchlines. The length of the joke then is short, and the audience is very aware of when it's over and when to laugh, and sometimes they're helped with a laugh track in the background. Again, it is a more obvious type of humor rather than the British style, which typically has the joke being a long, drawn-out, awkward situation or cringy moment.
I love this about the British approach is I don't tell me when to laugh. Don't make it obvious for me to laugh. I will find the funny parts. I feel like the British approach to comedy, they respect their audience's the intelligence of their audience more. Whereas America, it's just like, walk in with a turkey on your head. Ha 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 ha, laugh track, laugh everyone, laugh, laugh. I hate that. Like, I'll laugh when I find something funny. And if there's something really subtle that I miss and I don't laugh, so be it. Don't make me laugh. Provide stuff for me I'm going to find funny and I'll laugh.
That has laughter throughout. And if there is a one-liner in British comedy, there certainly isn't a laugh track. This is why Americans can often watch a British comedy show and think it's not funny, because they were waiting on the obvious jokes and the specific funny moments to point out, not realizing that the long and drawn-out awkward situation is the joke. For example, Gavin and Stacey, Father Ted, and Only Fools and Horses. Our second to last difference.
I do recommend a little bit later of a U.S. Office, the U.S. new version of The Office. That is in a later season. I think it's like season 5 or 6, where it's called Scott's Tots. And for most U.S. Office lovers, if you ask them, what's the most cringy, like, you don't even want to watch an episode, it's Scott's Tots. And it's around, like, there's no happy ending. It's around Michael Scott making this pledge, like, 12 years ago to a group of inner city, mostly black inner city kids that, like, if you graduate from high school, I will pay for all of your tuition. And then the time comes and it's like, that was 12 years ago. And it becomes the most awkward, unwatchable. I love to watch it, but, like, there is no slapstick punchline comedy. It's just like going there and the like the inner city kids do this whole thing, be like, we love you, Mr. Scott, like, and like do a dance routine for them, and Michael Scott is just like, I can't afford for anyone, and then it's just complete silence. However, I do have your very own laptop and everyone's batteries that I can give to each of you, non-refundable, and everyone just freaks out. It's the one very cringy episode of The Office that I think Brits might enjoy, just because it's like there's no, it's just awkward and awful and hilarious.
American and British comedy is all about the sincere nature of American comedy versus the sarcastic and deadpan British humor. In the UK, deadpan or dry humor is all about emotionless delivery, which in turn makes the thing you're joking about funny. It's associated with sarcasm and your face is very blank with no animation. You're not being open with your body language and the delivery that it is in fact a joke. This type of comic delivery is loved in the UK. Truly, I have never met people more skilled at deadpan humor than Brits. But the reason why Americans don't often get this humor is because American jokes and humor are often delivered with emotional sincerity. We're almost laughing along as we say the funny statement to indicate to you that we are in fact joking. Deadpan humor, if not native in your culture, can be very hard to pick up on if you're expecting sincerity. And for you Americans who say, well, I use dry humor, I'm sarcastic, I do deadpan here in America, yes, I believe you, but I guarantee you if you went around in the US with a British level of deadpan humor, you'd have no friends and literally everyone you interacted with would dislike you. Our final difference is the British ability to laugh at themselves as a major form of comedy. Self-deprecation is seen as incredibly funny. Highlighting your own fault and making light of your own failures is hilarious.
This is what I mean by, I think it's the Belushi guy. This is what I mean by the Animal House. I've never seen the Animal House, the movie, at least not in full. But I do remember Stephen Fry's analogy with the Animal House of the difference between British and American humor, and how the American sees themselves as the guy that, like, takes it and smashes the thing, and the British guy, they want to be the ukulele player who's just playing along and someone grabs their thing and just smashes it. And it's just like, that says a lot.
To Brits. There's little room for your own fault, and making light of your own failures is hilarious to Brits. There's little room for ego in British humor, and as much as your friend is at the mercy of you taking the mick out of them, you equally make jokes at your own expense to make yourself more approachable and relatable. Americans do self-deprecation a little bit, but in smaller doses than the Brits. Often, if you say something self-deprecating about yourself in the US, you might be met with someone saying something like, "Don't say that about yourself," or trying to make you feel better. Again, an American may feel you're being sincere rather than humorous.
I'm afraid to say this next part. I think with guys, I think guys have some more self-deprecation humor, and if you make fun of themselves, they'll be like, yeah, that's true, or something like that. So I think it does. I'm going to stop right there. Never mind.
It's not culturally seen as a good thing to talk yourself down in the US. Americans are attracted to confidence and this general positive outlook we discussed at the beginning of the video. And self-deprecation as a joke can often fall flat in that sense. Now that does bring me to the end of this video, but before we finish, I also want to point out some food for thought. If you watched my video about communication styles between the UK and the USA, you might remember the differences in a high context and a low context culture. And the idea is that America is a low context culture, which is not a judgment, but instead a way of describing that due to its makeup and history and other cultural factors, people communicate in America in more literal and direct ways than in the UK. They don't rely on hidden meanings.
Is that a way of saying that the USA is less coherent and we're more diverse? I know London is insanely diverse, but I think that our diversity, what did she just say?
Due to its makeup and history and
yeah, our makeup and history is that like we aren't as confident in everyone knowing our sarcasm and joking ways as in Britain, and so it can sometimes come across as confrontational. Like if a British person and American person interacted and like a British person like said some like thing that American might not sound very nice to them, and the British person is knowing it's just, you know, banter and funny, is expecting and also banter back to them. But when you give banter and then don't receive it, then it feels awkward because it's like, wait, no, I didn't mean that, you know?
other cultural factors, people communicate in America in more literal and direct ways than in the UK. They don't rely on hidden meanings. So while it can be easy as Brits to look at American humor and say, well, British humor is clearly more sophisticated. Look at those dumb Americans with their actual laugh tracks. You'd be simplifying the situation, and that's fine. No one's gonna arrest you for that.
I think it's true.
Actually, American humor in its openness and sincerity works better in a low context culture that is used to a more direct means of communication.
In a low context culture that is used to different forms of comedy, and so if you interact with some people, you're not as sure of the person you're interacting with who is new to you understands your comedy. But I think a lot of people in Britain, they understand, everyone gets the picture, they're on board, and so there's less hesitancy to act like you want to act in your comedic ways, you know?
So while it might not be right or funny to you, it is right for the culture in which it comes from, which is exactly what I would say to Americans who think British humor isn't funny. It's not funny to you because it doesn't fit in with your culture, but it certainly does in theirs. As for me, my sense of humor has definitely blended. I enjoy deadpan and dry British humor, and I can still laugh at Will Ferrell driving a motorcycle through a house and getting stuck in a wall, so it just means I get to enjoy even more comedy. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.
That was fantastic. Girl Gone London. I've seen a good amount, a handful, probably around 5 different videos on British versus American comedy, or just British comedy. I find it fascinating. Not just fascinating comedically, like in comedy sense, but just in the way it shows our cultural and historical differences. So love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. If I said anything wrong you disagree with, call me out. Or answering any questions I had, any comments at all. Love y'all. I mean that, guys. Like, chin up. If you're down, watch a nice comedy video. You'll feel good soon. Don't worry. Emotions are fickle. See you guys next time. Bye.